Hello and welcome back to the channel once again. My name is Hollow and today we're talking about what everyone seems to be talking about lately. It's Blue Protocol, an upcoming MMORPG out of Japan which looks absolutely fantastic. I mean, literally look at it. This cel-shaded style is so colourful, so vibrant, but hey, you know, the game, that actually looks pretty good too. What a bonus. It seems a lot of people are talking about Blue right now. I've seen videos on this game from other YouTubers like Cry, MMOBite, Lazy Peon, and Arix has some videos on it too now. Even some of my viewers went out of their way to DM me about this game, so I had to have a proper look. This very anticipated MMORPG only recently had its NDA lifted, which is why everyone's suddenly talking about it. It's allowing people to finally talk about it and share what they saw in the alpha, and information is spreading like wildfire. Not to mention, the devs have started doing regular streams, showing the game off on their official YouTube channel, answering questions, explaining with their own details, and of course, showing gameplay. And so, from all of that information, I've put together this video with all the info you could possibly need to know about what this game is, when it's coming, all the nitty-gritty details like how the classes work and more, so I hope this is useful. Let's start with the core of the game. In the vibrant world of Blue, you'll be creating your own character and picking from 4 major classes to start with, which are actually decided by the weapon you're using rather than an ironed out permanent choice. This allows you to swap between whatever weapons you want to use, which changes the class that you're playing, and then you'll be progressing that spec or class instead of the original one you chose, which allows for some expansive hybrid gameplay if you choose to swap between weapons regularly. Long term, you'll be able to do everything, but of course it will take a lot longer to max out every weapon at once rather than just sticking and focusing to one. Still, I really appreciate the freedom of choice. It kind of reminds me weirdly of RuneScape's combat system where you can use melee, ranged, and magic and swap between them with no penalty to the others. You're just managing them more all at once now. The world itself may surprise you. It's not actually a truly open world, but it's separated into massive zones that you travel between, kind of like Final Fantasy XIV. Each zone is connected to one another both functionally and visually. As you travel these giant areas, you'll be able to see the other zones in the distance or the background, and then traveling between them is separated by these like simple dotted barriers and a short loading screen once you do cross. Since the world is actually quite big, there are confirmed mounts in the game that we've seen in the trailers and a bit of gameplay, which does kind of reinforce the idea that the zones are large enough to need mounts. The character creator itself is more reasonable than expansive. You've got lots of hair, face, and accessory options and lots of colours to choose from, but it isn't insane like take BDO's Mad One. It's functional and varied like Code Veins. The zones of the world are connected together by a hub, which is a giant town that's going to be filled with hundreds of other players running around, with the world on a day and night cycle that will cycle every 30 minutes or so. Here at the hub, you'll meet important NPCs that grab quests from, do crafting, maintain those professions, or hang out with other players. Nicely, it seemed like there weren't many invisible walls or barriers around this hub. You can swim around in the water, in the ocean, you could fall off a high ledge and die if you're not careful, and actually speaking of crafting, it's all done via this giant machine that's in this hub, and it takes up resources that you're going to find in the world from defeating enemies, to then turn into weapons or armor. Apparently, the monsters that you fight aren't really going to be dropping weapons or armor themselves, but more rare or important materials that you take to this machine. That way, you're able to focus on crafting what it is you want or need, rather than hoping that the weapon for the class you actually play or care about drops. You then have the agency to decide what it is you want to make yourself. The story of the game will have fully voiced acting and characters and cinematics, sending you to different places around the world to complete tasks or head to more dangerous areas, and it seems like they put a major focus on having a good storyline for the player as they're progressing up the levels and, you know, playing the MMO, but who knows if it'll actually be good. In these types of games, storylines can be quite shallow or silly or, you know, very obvious where they're going, mostly irrelevant to the gameplay. And the snippets of the cinematics that we've seen from the trailers do look really cool, but hopefully the storyline is actually interesting. Playing solo is totally viable. All classes come with their own healing abilities that work differently based on the class that you're playing as, but you will see other players in the world as you're questing in each zone, and it's all decided by the channel system, which works just like many other MMOs or even World of Warcraft's layering. There'll be a max number of players in each channel, and you can party up with others that you find. If you do choose to join a friend in another channel, everyone's brought to the same channel of the party leader. Once you've grouped up, there's going to be dungeons and world bosses to find and fight. The game does use that Holy Trinity style of healer tank DPS, which I will get more into as we talk about the classes and how they work, but the dungeons themselves seem really cool. They're filled with vertical terrain that you've got to climb or jump over, walls you can break through, you can fall to your death, so there's definitely some platforming elements going on. Not to mention the monsters and bosses themselves. You've got to maintain your aggro, keep the party healthy, do good DPS, dodge the telegraphed abilities, standard RPG stuff, but it's all looking good in this world. Having said that, they do let you turn off allied spell animations if you want. When you're in bigger groups or even like big raids fighting world bosses, there is a lot of visual clutter going on from the gameplay I've seen, so it'll be nice to turn that off if you need to. Speaking of that, by the way, the UI is surprisingly minimalistic. It uses good elements of hidden UI until it's relevant or needed, and that's when it shows up. I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. Many Eastern MMOs, more specifically that Korean style, have UI coming out at every goddamn corner of your screen. Usually, yeah, you can manipulate it to your will and organize it however you want, which is nice, but still, it's so much going on, way too much to have to organize, and here, I don't know, this style is much more pleasing to me. As you're leveling up, you'll unlock skill points to spend on your main class or general skills that all players have access to. I assume there'll be more like passive effects or professions more than likely. And each class comes with their own stamina bar that you can use to dodge up to 4 times for iframes that then you'll have to recover if you use them all at once, letting you avoid damage where possible, or you can use that stamina to sprint or jump or even do aerial combat. Right now there isn't a lot known about the PvP scene of Blue Protocol. It's confirmed that there's going to be some sort of arena mode, which probably includes like 1v1s and team battles, but hopefully we do see a dueling system, maybe when we're in the hub or out in the world with friends. There has actually been some data mine names of different PvP modes though, called Bounty, Payload, and Domination, and those names do give us a good idea of like what kind of modes these are and what you do in them, but there isn't official word on it that I've seen yet. Obviously with the fast, smooth movement and combat of this game, it would be really good for PvP, so I do hope they dive into it a good amount, but I'd be really shocked if they didn't. So now we know all those main details of the game, let's talk about the 4 classes, and we'll start with the Aegis Fighter, our sword and shield user. This one is the most defensive class of the 4, made for survival or more of a main tank role. Using a unique resource known as endurance, these guys spend endurance to nullify incoming damage, blocking with their shield. However, when that endurance bar is totally consumed, your shield will break and you won't be able to defend yourself until you recover. Each class comes with a main action and a secondary action, which is used on mouse and keyboard with left click and right click. Your main action is always your chain attack, the combos. 4 swings with this fighter will send out a final hit that does extra damage and debuffs the enemy, reducing the damage that they deal. And then the secondary attack, in this case, is the shield. Just hold this down and then you block all damage at the cost of endurance. However, if you do use your main attack while blocking, you do a special riposte attack, which basically works almost like a parry. If you do this right after a successful block, you will send enemies flying with some nasty damage. I'm all about that. And each class comes with their own skills and abilities on top of that, which also has selection of ultimates as well. For the Aegis Fighter, you've got a heal. Everyone gets a heal. Aegis Fighter has a heal that heals you and nearby party members. You have a shield bash, which will charge forward and stun enemies struck. You've got Fortress, which is an AoE attack that deals damage, increases the aggro that you start generating, obviously so you can hold threat on enemies. We got Blow Beat, which sends out like wind blade shots at range, which also generates good aggro, so this will be a great way to send out and hit multiple enemies at once to maintain aggro on sort of a group of enemies. We have Shield Guard, which will buff you and the party, reducing the damage that you take, but it also removes endurance cost on your blocks temporarily. So every time you're hit while you're buffed with this and you block it, that actually reduces the cooldown on other abilities. So this is really good for maintaining fast-paced combat. You want this buff on as much as possible, always having it active or getting the most value out of it. And finally, Judgment Shield, this ultimate ability where you send out a giant shockwave, smashing enemies, dealing big damage, and knocking them flying, which is also great for aggro generation, and it'll even refresh your endurance from 0 back up to 100 if you maximize this well. A very versatile class, one I'm very interested in. I mean, the animations are great, but I like the gameplay it seems to build. Next, let's move on to the Spellcaster, or the ranged mage class, which uses a staff and controls elements, and we'll be using mana instead of, let's say, stamina or endurance. And mana is a resource that won't recover over time. You need to regain it by using skills. For this mage, we'll be using our main and secondary attacks to generate mana. So the main attack is your chain attack, as always, right? And that restores mana as you use it. And then you have your secondary attack, which is using bolts, which also restores mana. So you use your basics to restore mana, and then you use your skills to spend it. Speaking of skills, we've got your heal ability, which is an AoE heal around you, so any allies near you get healed as well. You have Fire Blast, which will consume mana to shoot a fireball, which you can charge and channel up to 3 levels, doing more damage per level that you charge. We have Lightning, which also consumes mana and then shoots out lightning bolts that can also be charged up to 3 levels. But you create more bolts the more it's charged, and max charge gives faster charging for all skills. So logically, you'd use lightning to start a fight out and then start blasting out fire blasts while you're fast channeling them thanks to the lightning buff. We also have Blizzard, which will consume mana and place a chargeable snowstorm on the ground that slows and damages any enemy is in it, and if you charge it for longer, well, then it lasts a lot longer too. Trinity shots that come from your secondary attack will also apply a buff, which gives cooldown reduction on ultimate abilities, so you definitely want to be using these as much as possible. And finally, that ultimate ability, the Meteor Inferno, dropping a huge meteor on enemies, of course doing massive damage to anyone hit. I know which class Rage is going to be playing, and it's this one. Next, let's talk about the Twin Striker, which is a melee DPS class using 2 axes, dual wielding, and you're going to be doing damage constantly with skills that keep you alive via lifesteal mechanics. For your main action, you've got your chain attacks, which do multiple strikes in a row, and you can actually attack and move to jump in the air, then performing aerial attacks with this. Your secondary attack is a spin attack, which reduces the incoming damage during the spin, and you're also CC immune, so if you time this ability well, right as you're getting hit, you're going to reduce the damage you take, and you can't be stopped as well, so potentially a really good PvP ability. You also get a follow-up attack to this, where you do a quick heal after you use this spin, and then for a brief time after that, all attacks get a lifesteal effect, so as you attack, you regenerate health. It seems really important to get this effect going as soon as possible, and then be aggressive in the combat. You get the most out of this class by trading with the enemy rather than dodging, and healing through it or reducing the damage you take. For skills, we have Life Drain, which is a chargeable attack, and then on release, based on the length of the charge, that will decide how much damage you get in and also how much health you get back from the drain. We have Fall Impact, which is sort of a heroic leap ability. You leap at an enemy and it'll stagger or even knock enemies down, dealing damage. We have Brutal Blow, which increases the skill damage of all your skills temporarily and applies aggro effects on you, which is interesting. This is a melee DPS, but it's not the tank guy, right? And yet it has aggro generation. It seems like this class is really catered towards being a kind of half tank or off tank role between that of the Aegis. While the Aegis tank is recovering endurance, you can pull aggro as the Twin Striker and tank temporarily with your damage reduction and of course all that lifesteal, swapping the aggro between the two melee users instead of having one dedicated tank. Next we have Axe Tornado, which will make you CC immune again and give everyone in the party more damage as well, so buffing everyone up. And finally, Vortex Impact, which is a giant AoE damage ability. Really unique one, not really what I was expecting. You're kind of a berserker or an off-tank role. I really like what they're doing here. Even though this game's meant to be sort of a holy trinity of tank, DPS, and healer, it seems like everyone can heal and everyone can tank in a way, at least the melee users. I find it really interesting anyway. Finally, for the last class, we have the Blast Archer, which is a long-range DPS class using a bow. For the main action of the Blast Archer, you'll be shooting lots of arrows, and with the last shot, you'll get a special attack that will shoot multiple arrows at once, and then for the secondary attack, you shoot a powerful arrow that will do more damage and be more penetration. If you use a movement input right after shooting this, you do a mini dodge right after the shot, which allows for clever dodging or kiting mid-combat. The Blast Archer's heal ability is a AoE heal you channel and charge and put down on the ground as a sort of healing area. The longer you channel it, the longer it lasts, and you can put that down and stand in it with your party to heal up. For skills, the Blast Archer has Charge Arrow, which is a channeled up powerful shot, which does more damage the longer you charge it, of course. But interestingly, if you hit a quote weak spot, you'll do even more damage. So I guess as the ranger, you're supposed to be attacking specific parts of the body on targets. We have Lethal Shower, which shoots multiple poison arrows for damage over time. Stampede Arrow, which is a chargeable arrow rain style of skill where you channel it over time. The longer you channel it, the longer it lasts, and it's an area of effect that enemies stand in and take damage, so great AoE ability. We have Slalom Shot, which reduces the charge time and aggro generation of all your skills, and it also gives cooldown reduction to your party and yourself. And finally, Mortal Gravity. Yeah, just shoot a black hole from your bow, no big deal. It'll pull enemies into it, dealing damage. And if you pair that with, say, your arrow rain, that'll be a lot of AoE damage. So this class seems like a reliable, solid AoE farmer or AoE damage dealer. But there you have it, the 4 main weapons or classes in Blue Protocol. Couldn't tell you which I want to play more, but maybe I'm going to be one of those hybrid players. I really like the idea of being a mix of an Aegis fighter for your in-the-face fighting and tanking, and then swapping to a Blast Archer for ranged gameplay, maybe in solo or depending on what the party needs. Finally though, let's conclude this video with the business model for Blue Protocol. It's going to be a free-to-play game when it releases in Japan with seasonal passes, and it's going to sell cosmetics that don't affect gameplay, but they're just like costumes. The devs are claiming that there will never be any pay-to-win elements in this game. This is a Japanese MMO, which you shouldn't confuse with, say, a Chinese or Korean style of MMO. Japanese MMOs generally don't have much of a problem with pay-to-win, but, you know, who knows? What about a Western release? That's kind of important. Well, I'm relieved to say that Bandai Namco have hired a localization director for this game, and there's going to be no IP blocks on the upcoming beta test this March, which all do point to Western release planned, but we don't have a timeline on that, which is, I don't know, kind of sad, but at the same time, it's kind of good news. Many big MMOs exist right now that are working on a Western release, and it takes a long time. This game isn't even released yet. In fact, the first beta hasn't even been out yet, and they're already organizing Western release. So I'm very hopeful on this one for a fast release in the West post its original release in Japan. The game looks wonderful. Mechanically, visually, fast movement, no clunkiness that I've seen. It's charming. I really like the direction of it. And as I mentioned, that beta is upcoming in March. It's just around the corner, so we should see a lot more information then and a lot more raw gameplay to check out too. The beta's only going to last 4 days, so unfortunately it's going to be short and sweet. For now though, that's got to be it for my everything you need to know about Blue Protocol. I hope this video was a good resource of information. It was a lot for me to research and go through, but I don't know. What do you think about the game? I'm really hopeful for it. I'm quite excited about this one. Anyway though, I've been Hollow, you've been you, and I will see you next time in my next video.